11 days, and the 11th day has a weather which is very different altogether from the other days, it could change my entire decision tree. It could lead to having a prediction of not going out on a sunny day, or it could lead to a prediction like I will go out every day irrespective of the weather. So this whole prediction is kind of changes. Even the structure of the tree can change irrespective of whatever small amount of change is there in the input data. So I'm going to further explain on the this unstability limitation in the few remaining topics. Okay. So moving on, as I talked about that limitation, the limitation is that, see, we have a single decision tree, and it can be very sensitive to the training data. So I would like you all to kind of pay attention to the diagram over here. So the concept that we use over here is called as bootstrap aggregation or bagging. So what exactly do we do in bagging? I'll explain it to you, then we can read through it, and I'm sure you'll understand what exactly I meant through this. So suppose we have a data set given, we take a random sample of data and train a tree from that. Okay. And then we take another different, like a different, nothing conclusive, random sample of the same data set, train the data to create another tree. And we continue to do so till we kind of cover a large number of data sets, number of random samples in the data set. And what we get from here is that we ultimately get these multiple decision trees. Now, from these multiple decision trees, we take an average vote, and these average votes are taken, or like an average prediction is taken, and ultimately we get the final result that we want. Like suppose if out of 5 decision trees, three of those decision trees say that on a sunny day, you're not going to go out to play badminton, irrespective of the humidity or irrespective of the thing. If we see that three of them are giving out the result that on a sunny day, you're not going to go out to play badminton, then the final result of the total ensemble tree that's going to be created is going to have the decision that on a sunny day you're not going to go out to play badminton. So that's like bagging is done. So this will like reduce the unstability of the training data that was initially affecting the training decision tree so deeply. That kind of changes the whole ball game. Now moving on. Now random forest classifier. I'm included this over here mainly because it uses concepts of bagging along with limits, but it's just a brief overview. If you're very, and I'm sure if you go into machine learning and data sets, it's going to really uh, be very one of the very important algorithms to go into. But this is like a basic overview. So the random forest uses the concept of bagging, but also uses like limits itself to the like, and it looks only into certain features, and then these whole features are kind of joined together to create the ultimate training data set that we are looking into. So we'll suppose we take those different trees and we look only at the feature that we are looking into. Like over here, you can see in example tree one, we only looked at the right tree, and then over here in the second tree, you only looked at the say the middle range, and in the final one, you can see only the right left tree. So similarly, we look at these features, and only the features that we look into or we want, we take all of them and make it into a training data set for that. So this is just a brief overview. Of course, if you are very interested in random forest, you can look into it, and it has a very large and interesting depth to it. Finally, we lead to boosting. Now, boosting is the second way in which we go through dealing with the instability of the uh, decision trees that we were looking at initially. So what we do, as you can see, there's like a distinct difference between boosting and bagging. In bagging, it was parallel, but in boosting, it's sequential. So I'll explain what exactly happens here. So in boosting, what we do is that we take the training data, of course, create a decision tree, and then we look at the various errors of this decision tree, and then train the second decision tree specifically only on the errors of the previous one. So this is why it's called like a sequential form. So we start from the data set that we take, we create one training data, a decision tree, find if there are any errors, and then work on the errors of the training data and create the second decision tree. And we continue to do so till we have like the most accurate decision tree created in the end. So, all in all, this is all I had to cover over here. There's a lot of practical approach and example approach which is going to be covered after me. So, this is what I wanted to give you like a brief overview and intuition too. If there are any doubts, I'm open to any questions. So, please do let me know.
All right. I don't see any doubts, but anybody, if you've got doubts, please put them in the chat box, and Pratnadi or I will try to answer them. Um,
Yes.
okay, so should we continue then?
Yeah, I have covered what I wanted to.
All right, all right. Yeah. Thank you. Yeah. Yeah. I hope you can see my screen. Okay. Yeah, so I think Pratna covered the intro to the decision trees really well. So what I'll be covering is how do we build them? We understood what a decision tree is and how it helps us, but how do we build a decision tree? So okay, let's take a look. So first of all, like a decision tree is very simple to understand. It's very intuitive. Like basically, it's just a glorified nested if else statement. But what the decision tree does is it tells us which if statement to take first and which to take second. So, for example, this is some data we have. Let's start presenting. And yeah, okay. So we have some data over here, and we have these. This is our target class skips or reads, and we have other attributes like author, thread, length, and where. And this is just a subset of the data, and we have to classify these. So we know the author is known, the thread is new, length is short, and the place is work. So how do we classify the action as? Do we skip the book or do we read the book? So this is basically a book classification data set where you want to predict whether a given reader will read a certain book or not. So you can take it, you can consider it a simple example of a recommendation system. Okay. So first, you can either split from length. So now we are learning how to build one. Okay. So let's understand why we need a decision tree. Why can't we just have like five if statements in a row, and then depending on the threshold, we give the answer directly. So let's understand why we need it. So we have the length here, and the total values for the there are total 18 rows in the data set, and nine of them have skipped it, and nine of them have read it. Okay, and we have our length attribute over here, and length has two options, long and short. And what happens if we choose long for the length is everybody skips it. Nobody likes a long book, and zero people read it. And if the length is short, most of the people read it. So nine people read it and two people skip it. Okay, I hope you. This is just a simple example. But now, is there some other attribute you can classify on? So we took length here, but we also have author, thread, and where, right? So which should we take first? So this is another option. So we have the thread here. Again, there are nine skips and nine reads in the data set. And if the thread is new, I don't know what the thread of a book is, but just let's just assume we know. Okay. So the thread is new, and three people skip it if the thread is new, and seven people read it. And if it is old, six people skip it and two people read it. All right. So, which do you think is the better attribute here? Should we first classify based on length, or should we first classify based on thread? Can you put the answer in the chat box? L- Yup. Length. Yeah, correct. And why would that be? So the reason is because it gives us a much cleaner classification, right? So as we can see here, it almost cut, so it eliminated the number of reads, and it really reduced the number of skips here. So that is what our aim in a classification data set is, right? To correctly classify the output, so to correctly classify the input based on the training examples we've got. So a decision tree is basically a classifying model. So yes, no, or multi-class classifications, all of that, a decision tree helps with it. So yeah, as we saw previously, we have two attributes A1 and A2, and if A1 is true, we get this division. If A1 is false, we get 8 positives and 30 negatives. Similarly, if A2 is true, 18 positives and 33 negatives, and A2 is false, 11 positives and 2 negatives. So again, which do you think is better here? I think it's clear that it's A1, right? This, because of this 18 plus, and this doesn't help us. Like it almost doesn't help us in classifying. Like we were just as good over here. Look at it, 29, 35, and it marginally reduced the difference. So I think A1 will be better here. So how do we measure this? How do we measure this sort of impurity that we have when we divide based on different attributes? So from our JE days, it's entropy. So we have the probability over here and the entropy scale over here. So if you have like a certain uh, uh, like absolute uncertainty of something happening and absolute certainty of something happening, then there is no entropy, there is no chaos, so you know that is going to happen. But if you have the probability close to like 0.5, then you have maximum entropy, because there is maximum chaos, you don't know what will happen. So if S is a sample of training examples, P plus is the proportion of positive, P minus is proportion on negative. This is the formula, right? I hope you remember it uh, from the CET and JE days, but even if you don't, it's okay. Like entropy is one way to measure this. There are also a few other ways to measure the impurity between the attributes, and that is called Gini impurity. So we'll have a look at that as well. So I hope you've understood everything till now. If at any point you get any questions, please put them in the chat box. Okay, don't wait for me to finish. Because if you don't understand one thing, you won't understand the rest of the stuff following that. Okay, so let's take a simple data set and build the tree ourselves. So we have three attributes over here: chest pain, good blood circulation, blocked arteries, and we have to classify whether the patient will get heart disease or not. So this is the data set, and this is the sort of decision tree, the outline that we will end up with. Okay. So the first thing we want to know is which attribute to choose from these three, which will give us the best classification for this attribute alone. So we saw that earlier, right? How do we do that? And so the only thing is, right, we need to check everything. So the difference between algorithms like linear regression and logistic regression, which you studied yesterday, is that first they take some random initialization, and then depending on the training examples, it improves its accuracy. So it changes its weights, it changes the slope and all of that to better fit the data set. But in decision tree, there is no such thing. What you do is you check everything first, and then whatever you find best, you put it there. Okay, so it's much more simpler and intuitive to understand. Like it is much closer to how we would think, like how we would solve a problem, and so it's pretty simple to understand. So when chest pain is true, you get heart disease. You positive cases of heart disease to be 105, and no, like there's no heart disease to be 39. Similarly, if chest pain is false, then yes is 34 and no is 125. So like that makes sense, right? If you've got chest pain, there is a higher probability that you may have heart disease. So similarly, let's do the same thing for good blood circulation. So again, if the blood circulation is good, high chances of not having a heart disease, and if it is not good, high chances of having a heart disease, and that is how the distribution here looks like. Then finally, blocked arteries. So blocked arteries, again, you do the same thing, but notice that we have a missing data example here. Like we don't know the block if a patient had blocked arteries, but we do know that he had chest pain, he didn't have good blood circulation, and he did have heart disease. So what you can do is like there are two options. For so right now we'll just skip it. So if you look here, we have 303 patients in the study, but for blocked arteries, if you sum this up, I think you'll find it to be 302 because we skipped this one data set. It might be less than 302, but it's definitely 302. Okay. So either you can skip it or you can find a correlation between that. So we'll look at how to find a correlation that between that sometime later. Okay. So this is what the summary looks like. This is what we did in the last three slides. Um, and yeah, now the question is, how do we measure which of these is the best? There must be some mathematical formula to do it, right? And yes, we do have it. It's called the Gini impurity. So it's very simple. So the Gini impurity is measured as 1 minus probability of yes squared minus probability of no squared for each of these nodes. Each of the leaf nodes has its own Gini impurity. So for this node right here, the Gini impurity is 1 minus 105 upon 105 plus 39 squared and minus 39 plus 105 plus 39 squared. So what we do next is we similarly calculate the Gini impurity for this node as well. So we'll receive some value for that. And let's assume this value is like zero point 0.5. This value is like zero point 0.6. So what we do to find the Gini impurity of this node is we take a weighted average of it. So 105 plus 39 is 144, and 125 plus 34 is 154. Okay. So depending on the total values of this yes heart disease yes and no outputs, we take a weighted average of it. So this would basically be zero point 0.5 into this sum plus zero point 0.6 into this sum upon total number of patients. So that's how we find the Gini impurity of the chest pain attribute. And this is so this is the Gini impurity of all the three attributes: 0.364, 0.36, and 0.381. Yeah. So now we need to reduce the impurity the most, right? We need our classification to be as clean as possible. So which one of these do you think is the best? Like you just have to compare these values and take the minimum. So good blood circulation gives us the cleanest division between the uh, for the first attribute at least. So our first attribute we fix that as good blood circulation. Okay, so we got the first node in our decision tree, the root node as we say, and this is our the division. So we do the same thing again for all the corresponding nodes. So now we have already used up one attribute. So we have two attributes left: chest pain and blocked arteries. So again, for this node, we check the Gini impurity for chest node as well as blocked arteries. And again, for this node, we check the same thing. So we check the Gini impurity for sorry, chest pain and blocked arteries. So okay, so this is basically what I explained. So Gini impurity for chest pain in for this data set. So now we only consider the subset of data set that we have here. So 37 and 127. So that will be 164 data rows. So using this 164 data rows, we use chest pain and blocked arteries to calculate the Gini impurity for both of them. And we take whichever one is lower to be the next attribute. So here we have blocked arteries. So we take blocked arteries as the next attribute and chest pain. So yeah, this again, this is like a step that has been skipped. So, but I hope you understood, right? Like, um, there is only one attribute left, and that's the only place that that is the only attribute that you can put here. Okay, there is no other attribute, so you don't need to calculate further. But you do need to calculate further, as we'll see. Like, it's not necessary to use all the attributes that we have in our data set in the decision tree. um do you know why that is? So we have an example here, like for no blocked arteries, we have this part here, 13 and 102. And let's take chest pain here. Let's see if chest pain does a better job of classifying this than the node itself. So calculating the Gini impurity for chest pain on this data subset, we get a value of 0.29. But the value of this node itself is zero point 0.2. So if we don't classify it, we already have less gene impurity. Am I going fast? Should I explain this part, or do you guys understand it? Just put yes if you've understood everything up till now. Like, if I was going too fast, just let me know. I'll explain the last few slides again. And if you've understood everything, put yes in the chat box. Okay, what part should I repeat? ओके, इधर तक समझ आया था, फर्स्ट नोड क्लासिफाई हुआ उधर तक समझ आया था. ओके ओके ओके, ऑलराइट. Okay, so basically, what Gini impurity is we need a way to measure which attribute is better. So we need a way to measure which attribute to put at the root of the decision tree. Okay, so um, like, you can think of it as like a nested if statement. You have three if statements to that you have to put to correctly classify it. But which do you take first? Like, uh, let's say you are trying to solve this problem with an if statement. So first you say that if you have chest pain, then there will be a nested if, and else you don't have heart disease. Then in that chest pain, you again have one more if statement to check with good blood circulation and blocked arteries. But the question here is, which if statement do you put at the root of the, like, the first if statement? What will that be? What will be the root of the decision tree? Okay, so how do we calculate that? So we have a value for that which is called Gini impurity, and the lower the Gini impurity, the better it is. So 1 minus so this is the formula of it, right? 1 minus probability of yes squared minus probability of no squared. And you calculate Gini impurity for each node. For each node, like, this node here, this chest pain yes node will have its own Gini impurity. This chest pain no node will have its own Gini impurity, and chest pain as a whole will have some Gini impurity. And what we aim to do is we need to reduce this chest pain Gini impurity as much as possible. So if the blocked arteries impurity is less than chest pain, we'll take blocked arteries as a root node instead of chest pain. Um, so is this clear? Did you understand the why we use Gini impurity? Okay, okay, cool. So okay, so moving on, we now you understood the method of this, right? So the Gini impurity for this node will be 1 minus 105 upon 105 plus 39 squared minus 30, 39. So no has 39 over here. So 39 upon 105 plus 39 squared. Similarly, we calculate the impurity for this. Okay. Uh, Similarly, we do 1 minus 34 upon 34 plus 125 squared minus 125 upon 34 plus 125 whole squared. So we get some value for both for this as well as this, for the left node as well as the right node. And how do we find the overall Gini impurity of test pane is we take a weighted average between those two values. So let's say this is A, this value is A, this value is B, and this total is some X, this total is some Y, and this will be AX plus BY upon X plus Y. A simple weighted average formula. Okay, and that is how you find the Gini impurity of chest pain. So we did all of, so like you can calculate if you want to, but this is what the final results are, right? You just need to do the same step 3 times and choose the least Gini impurity. So 0.36 here is the least impurity. Like we need the impurity to be lowest to make sure the classification is the best. Okay. And here our best option is good blood circulation, which has an impurity of 0.36. So we put good blood circulation at the root of our node, and we have two left and right childs. The left child has so 37 and 127. So that is what you can see here. That is what the split data set looks like. And here you have 133. So that is what the split data set here looks like. So now you took care of the first if statement, but now you have a second if else statement as well, right? You need to find the final result. Like if I give you some value of circulation, chest pain, and arteries, you need to tell me if I'll have heart disease or not. And for that, we need to consider the rest of the attributes as well. So, so now we have two left: chest pain and blocked arteries, because we have already used up good circulation, right? So now, which do we put over here? Like, should we put chest pain or should we put blocked arteries? And for that, again, we do the same method that we did for the root node. We calculate the Gini impurity for the chest pain. We calculate the Gini impurity for the blocked arteries. The same method, like depending on the data set, we'll know that 13 are yeses if and 98 rows are no when this data set is concerned. And we'll know that yes, like if there is some chest pain, then there will be 24 yeses and 29 nos for heart disease. And similarly, just as we calculated this method, so calculating impurity for this and then the weighted average, we do the same thing here as well, and we find out that the blocked arteries impurity is 0.29 and impurity for chest pain is 0.3. And here, which one is lower? Blocked arteries, right? So that's better for us. So for this node, we'll put the attribute blocked arteries. This is what we did here. Now forget about this chest pain for a while and just focus on this 13 and 102. Okay, just focus on this 13 and 102 वाला part. तो अभी उसमें क्या होगा? Ignore this chest pain. Okay, that is like a skipped step, but वो लोग ने directly लिख दिया है, but it's okay. Like it's not too confusing. So Abhi, we have 13 yeses and 102 nos in no blocked arteries. So now we can do the same thing here, right? So एक ही बचा है अभी chest pain और उसके हिसाब से attributes अगर हम लोग divide करें तो क्या आता है? ये आता है yes is 100 and sorry yes is 7, no is 26, yes is 6 and no is 76. अभी इसका जिनी इम्प्योरिटी कैलकुलेट करोगे ना तो क्या आएगा पता है? 0.29. लाइक अगेन इसका इम्प्योरिटी कैलकुलेट करो, इसका इम्प्योरिटी कैलकुलेट करो एंड देन टेक अ वेटेड एवरेज ऑफ बोथ ऑफ देम and you'll end up with 0.29 for the chest pain wala part. Now let's calculate the impurity of this node alone. Bas ye only this 13 and 102. So what was the formula? 1 minus yes squared minus no squared. तो अगर वो करते हैं तो व्हाट डू वी फाइंड इज द इम्प्योरिटी इज 0.2. So without classification, we have a better split of the data set than with classification by chest pain. So now do you understand why we don't take chest pain here? Like it's okay if we don't take all the attributes in the data set. The only condition is impurity should keep decreasing. If impurity doesn't decrease, अगर वो वापस हम लोग को ज़्यादा uncertainty दे रहा है split करने में, then there is no point in putting it there, right? So instead of putting chest pain over here and using all our attributes to divide the data set, to classify the data set, we don't use that for this particular subtree after blocked. इधर डाला chest pain क्योंकि इधर it was giving us a better division. But इधर नहीं डाला क्योंकि it was not giving us a better subdivision. Now same thing, just as we did over here, the same thing we do for this part as well. 133 wala. So, so that is how we build the tree, okay? This is how we build the tree. तो as you can see ऐसा ज़रूरी भी नहीं है कि सेम ऑर्डर होना चाहिए. इधर पहले ब्लॉक्ड आया पर इधर पहले चेस्ट पेन आया. So there is no such compulsion कि what do you have to put? You only have to put what the impurity tells you. जो कम है उसको पहले डालो. ठीक है? So yeah, calculate. So let's just revise how we did all of that. So we took Gini impurity scores for each attribute. If the node itself has the lowest score, there is no point in separating the patients anymore and it becomes a leaf. If separating the data results is an improvement, then pick the separation with the lowest impurity value. Got it? Got the process? Okay. कोई डाउट नहीं है ना? Okay. Okay, so I'll move on. If you have any doubts, if you can think of them, then put them in the chat box. Okay. Yeah, or unmute yourself. Yeah, that is even better. Okay. So ये हो गया. This was our basic. So we saw how to build a decision tree, and all of this you'll see like ये सब जो मेहनत किया ना वो if we use the Python libraries, like if we use libraries like sklearn and all of that, ये सब एक लाइन में होता है मतलब. But why is it important to know how the decision tree is built is um, to debug it. Like if you are running into some errors, if you are not getting the required accuracy you want, then you need to know how it works to change it. Okay. ये सब we'll see a hands on उसमें ये सब एक लाइन में होता है मतलब it's just a function that you have to call and वो खुद से सब हो जाता है. ये हम लोग ने देखा कि it was a basic like it was yes no throughout like अगर blocked arteries है नहीं है, if chest pain है नहीं है, and last क्या था good blood circulation है नहीं है. तो like it was a classification thing, right? मतलब you had discrete values yes no and depending on that you had to divide. But what if you get a continuous value? मतलब weight है अभी, there is some weight in pounds and you have a corresponding column for heart disease. So how do we determine like what do you do? So if in our normal case, if you had weight as the node, one second. Okay, so no, let be. So if you have laser, sorry, if you have weight as the attribute here, you don't have two parts to divide it into, right? Yes weight, no weight, ऐसा कुछ तो है नहीं. तो क्या करोगे? What is the best option that we have? Like all you can do is weight certain less than a certain value? Yes, no. You'll have to frame the decision tree in that manner. And what will that value be? मतलब what will that threshold be कि अगर इससे कम है तो yes में जाएगा, इससे ज़्यादा है तो no में जाएगा. What will that value be? How do you find that? So how do you find that? So this is the process for that. So basically ये जो data set है उसको we sorted into an ascending order. So the weight is increasing, and we have the corresponding values for heart disease over here. And we take the average of between each pair of values and use it as the threshold, and try using it as our threshold for each time we use it, like each time we build the decision tree. So don't worry, समझा रहा हूँ, आराम से समझा रहा हूँ, okay. So weight is 155 180 and the average between that is 167.5. So we क्या, so adjacent weight सबके लिए calculate किए, adjacent average weights. अब क्या करेंगे कि विल टेक ईच ऑफ दीज एवरेज वैल्यूज, पहले 167.5 का देखेंगे. सो विल टेक द थ्रेशोल्ड एज 167.5. इज वेट लेस, यस, देन उसके आगे सब डिविजन होगा. इज वेट नो, देन उसके आगे सब डिविजन होगा. ओके. So yeah, so this is like this is what I meant. Is weight less than 167.5? Yes. Then sorry, no, sorry, this branch is yes. So there is no, so there's just one data source row here which is weight less than 167.5, and उसमें क्या है, उसमें heart disease नहीं है, so we have no here and yes 0. So gene impurity will be 0. Now can you tell me why it will be 0? Formula क्या था gene impurity का? 1 माइनस यस का probability माइनस नो का probability. अब यस का probability क्या है? 0/1 + 0, that is 0. इसमें क्या है, 1/0 + 1 which is 1. तो 1 - 1, तो जीन इम्प्योरिटी 0 आ जाएगा. तो वी वांट आवर इम्प्योरिटी टू बी 0. ये मतलब हम लोग का बेस्ट केस है कि एक में कुछ होगा ही नहीं और बाकी सब में ही सब होगा. तो वील नो कि दिस इज द बेस्ट पॉसिबल क्लासिफिकेशन वी कैन फाइंड. एंड अगेन सिमिलरली अभी ये जो आगे के वैल्यूज है उसमें 3 येस है एंड 1 नो है. So 3 people have heart disease, 1 doesn't, and the impurity comes out to be 0.375. So like again, we have the zero impurity here, 0.375 over here, and we do the weighted average. So 1 upon 1 plus 4. So the total value here is 4. The total value here is 1. So 1 upon 1 plus 4 into 0 plus 4 upon 1 plus 4 into point. Okay, so this is a typo. This should be 0.375. So we end up with some value 0.3. Okay. अभी ये सेम चीज करेंगे फॉर ईच ऑफ दिस 185 205 220 2 to 2.5 सबके लिए ये करेंगे. And we'll find out which has the lowest impurity. So this is what we do. Okay, for each weight average we find out the gene impurity using the same process. वे यही process use करेंगे to find out the gene impurity for each average, and जो lowest होगा that we'll use as our threshold. मतलब it's not even like, if you think about it, it's more like trial and error. Like you calculate each सबका एक बार calculate करते हो, and then the best value that you get is what you put. So it's different compared to machine learning algorithms that we've seen previously, but it works really well in some cases and it doesn't work very well in other cases. So but it's okay, right? Every algorithm has that thing. It has its advantages, it has its drawbacks. So this is how you would build the decision tree for a continuous moving variable. Okay, got it. मतलब आगे के स्टेप सब सेम होंगे, there will be no changes. So got it. Okay, thank you, Sai. All right. तो अभी हाँ, so now can you tell me what is the, sort of disadvantage of a decision tree? Can you tell me like where it won't work very well? We saw how a tree is built, right? It's very dependent on the data set, right? So what do you think like the drawback is? Okay. ठीक है, I'll only tell. So the drawback here is that, um, for if you give like testing examples that are similar to the data set, like they have been picked out of the data set, for example, and if they are very close to that, then it will work. But if even if it is like slightly less, like I'm not even talking about an outlier. Like we saw yesterday, Anuj spoke about why outliers are bad in machine learning, why you should remove them in the data pre-processing stage. But even if it is not a outlier, it will still not give us very good results, only because the tuning is so specific to the data set that it works only, like it works very well for that data set but not very well for the others. So it gives us accuracy problems, right? Matlab, if you give some other training example to it, there is a high chance that it won't classify it correctly. And one other thing that you that also screws up decision trees is that even if there is like some slight noise in the data set, अगर कुछ भी एक दो भी ऐसा आउटलायर चीजें आ गई which haven't been cleaned properly, then it will mess up the whole tree. Like it will change the thresholds, it will change the impurities, and hence we won't be able to put the correct attribute which we would have if the noise wasn't there. So it is not like, it is not very good. It is not very flexible. Okay, it is very good for some certain specific data sets, but it's not very flexible. So how do we solve that? Like I'll just give you a brief overview of random forest. Random for we मतलब एकदम detail में नहीं जाएंगे. But I just want to give you the intuition कि why random forests work. So what do you think like will make decision trees better? इतना इतना specific नहीं होना चाहिए ना, मतलब it should be flexible. So that is exactly what a random forest does. मतलब it doesn't consider each example and each attribute like we did in the decision tree. It takes random subsets of all of that. मतलब मस्ती हो रहा है ऐसा random forest में. So the trees have one aspect which prevents them from being the ideal tool is inaccuracy, because it's so specific to that data set. So step one to build a random forest is create a bootstrap dataset. So Pratna talked about what bagging is, right? Bagging and boosting. Bagging is used extensively in random forest. So the intuition is कि अगर तुम लोग randomly कुछ भी उठाओगे and उससे tree बनाओगे ना, and ऐसा बहुत सारे trees बनाओगे ना, then you'll get a better sort of um, average. So what is that word? You'll get a better average result for the training examples. Okay, so how do you create a bootstrap dataset? It is very simple. So you have this original dataset right here, and to create a bootstrap dataset that is the same size. Okay, yeah, so it has to be the same size as original. So if the original row, if the original set is 4 rows, then this still has to be 4 rows. But the important detail is we are allowed to do whatever we want. So we can pick the same sample more than once. We can not pick one sample at all. So ये 2 बार लिया. So we took 180, we took the 125 वाला row, and we took the 167 वाला row twice, and we skipped this 210 वाला row, and it's totally fine. It works. And so this is the bootstrap data set. And now एक तो हम लोग ने डेटा एग्जाम्पल्स का रैंडमली सबसेट उठाया, एंड दूसरा चीज करते हैं कि वी टेक रैंडम सबसेट्स ऑफ द एट्रीब्यूट्स एज वेल. कि मतलब ब्लड सर्कुलेशन, आर्टरीज, चेस्ट पेन, वेट, ये 4 है, उसमें से कोई भी 2 लो. गुड गुड ब्लड सर्कुलेशन, ब्लॉक्ड आर्टरीज फॉर ईच नोड इधर. तो again, like how you would build a normal decision tree, but only consider these two. So you would choose one. In this case, we randomly selected good blocked and blocked arteries, good blood circulation and blocked arteries as candidates for the root node. Why did we do that? Because it's random. We can do whatever we want. Now we do the same thing again. So ये दोनों के लिए एक रूट लिया, एक नोड लिया. Then for the next node, मतलब इधर जो नोड आएगा, लेफ्ट नोड आएगा, राइट नोड आएगा, we can again do the same thing. We can take whatever we want. We can take chest pain and weight. We can take good blood circulation and weight. We can take blocked arteries and good blood circulation again. So basically there are no rules. Now you will say like कि क्या कुछ भी कर रहे हैं. How does this work? So why does this work is we take a lot of them. So इधर तो 6 बताया है, but ideally you take like hundreds of decision trees for in a random forest, and all of them are random. So that's the name, right? Random forest. So you build hundreds of decision trees like that, and each tree has its own bootstrap data set, and each attribute in the tree is randomly selected from the set of attributes you have. So using that, we build a lot of decision trees. So now how do we predict a value is, you you have some data example that you want, and you put it into each of the tree. मतलब अभी एक सेकंड कैसे बताऊँ? Okay, so let's say you have like blood circulation over here and chest pain over here. So and that's the only two data attributes you have for this whole tree. So you'll classify depending on that, and let's say you get this no heart disease wala classification. So yes and no का एक counter रखो, and this classifies is at no. So no का 1 point, yes का 0 point. Similarly, you do it for all the things, and finally you end up with, let's say अगर 100 trees है, so you end up with 75 yeses and 25 nos. So what will be the final classification? 75 yes. Okay. Yeah. So
भव्य, हेलो।
take whatever data examples you want, take whatever attributes you want, but build hundreds of trees, and that way it will reduce the dependence on each attribute and each variable for each tree. Yeah, yeah. Small change in data, and we have to build it again. Yeah, yeah. So for each tree in the random forest, you take a new data set. मतलब जो original data set है ना, उसमें से कुछ भी उठाओ, build a new data set and build a new tree based on that. Well, for each tree, you can do randomly whatever you want. Take random data, take random attributes, but it has, but only thing is you need to do a lot of it.
हाँ भव्य, तूने
हाँ.
वो डाउट नहीं था, वो एक्चुअली मैंने आंसर दिया था पिछले बार का।
Oh, oh,
बट
yeah.
मुझे अभी एक डाउट है कि तूने वो 75-25 वाला बोला, वो क्या
हाँ,
था?
हाँ.
जैसे
मतलब बेसिकली अभी लेट्स से कि इधर 6 ट्रीज है, राइट? इधर 6 ट्रीज बताया है, बट आइडियली देयर वुड बी मोर देन 6, बट लेट्स से वी हैव 6 ट्रीज, एंड हर ट्री का क्लासिफिकेशन कुछ आएगा. मतलब अभी एक एग्जांपल इसमें डालेंगे, तो बेस्ड ऑन येस नो, लेट्स से वी एंड अप ऑन दिस नोड व्हिच इज येस. ऐसा हर ट्री का क्लासिफिकेशन आएगा.
हाँ
हाँ.
हाँ
तो वी जस्ट कीप अ काउंट ऑफ दोज क्लासिफिकेशंस कि अभी लेट्स से 6 ट्री है, तो 4 ट्रीज में येस आया, 2 ट्रीज में नो आया. So on an average, yes is more frequently classified than no. So our final output will be yes.
ओके, समझा।
हाँ. Yeah. So that is the only thing. Like you can do whatever you want, but because so that is the main aim of a random forest, to reduce dependence on the data set and the attributes, such that अगर थोड़ा change भी करे ना, तो it should give us correct classifications most of the time. Okay, got it. किसी को और कुछ डाउट है? ओके, आर देयर नो डाउट्स? अगर नहीं डाउट है तो नो लिख दो, मुझे अच्छा लगेगा. ओके, ओके, थैंक यू. Okay, so I hope you understood like the intro to decision trees which Pratna covered, and how do we actually build a decision tree. So it is very intuitive based compared to other algorithms. Um, uh, अभी एक छोटा सा वॉक थ्रू कर लेते हैं फ्रॉम इट्स अ वेरी सिंपल डेटा सेट, ज़्यादा टाइम नहीं लगेगा, आई टेक ओनली लाइक 5 minutes. So we'll build a decision tree, and we'll see how the predictions happen. Okay. So sklearn is another machine learning library that we use. Like I think yesterday Anuj used pandas and numpy to show you the data pre-processing part, but pandas and numpy are not like machine learning libraries, they are data processing libraries. scikit-learn sklearn is a machine learning library और भी है TensorFlow बहुत सारे हैं PyTorch but like this is very sklearn is very easy to use. It doesn't give you as many options to customize and change things, but it is very easy to learn and get started with. So and sklearn gives you like inbuilt support to some very common data sets. So from sklearn.datasets, import Iris. Iris is a dataset. It's a flower classification dataset. And sklearn.tree, import decision tree classifier. This is the classifier that we'll use. And sklearn import tree. So here Iris is equal to load Iris. We load the dataset into a variable called Iris. And X and Y is our training example and our training target. Okay. So let's take a look at what the like dataset is. So there are 150 data rows, मतलब 150 rows है. Number of attributes are 4 numeric. Okay, so these are our attributes: sepal length, sepal width, petal length, and petal width. So basically, it's a flower data set, and ये flower का attributes है. Okay, so these are our attributes. And classes क्या है? 3 classes है. Like previously वो heart disease वाले में कितने classes थे? 2 थे. Like there is heart disease, there is no heart disease. इसमें 3 है. Like iris setosa, iris versicolor, iris virginica. तो ये 3 classes है. And yeah, like this is basically it. It's a very simple data set, 150 examples, 4 attributes, and 3 classes. Okay, so Graphviz is like a visualization tool that you use to build a classification tree. And okay, sorry, I missed a part up there. And here CLF is equal to decision tree classifier, and CLF is equal to CLF fit XY. So the data set that we receive from Iris, so the examples and the target values is XY, and we fit that for CLF. So जो भी झंझट देखा ना, ये सब gene impurity, all of that can be condensed into these 2 lines. That's it. You initialize the tree like the classifier, and you fit that classifier for the data set we have. That's it. And you find the tree with all the stuff that we saw, the nodes, the attributes, gene impurities, all of that वो खुद से calculate करता है. Okay, so it's that simple. Like while implementing, you really won't need a lot of the details that we saw today, but it's important to know them because उसके बिना okay, you'll build up, you'll write some code and you'll show the output, but there's no point in doing that. मतलब समझ ही नहीं आ रहा है करके तो point क्या है. So Graphviz is again like a visualization tool that we use, and it gives us a very nice representation of the tree. Okay, so so let's see how it built it. So ये हम लोग ने देखा कि ये ऐसा continuous वाला था. It is a continuous attribute. Like it min is 4.3, max is 7.9, mean is 5.84, standard deviation is 0.83, and class correlation is 0.286. Okay, ये class correlation क्या है? Class correlation is basically कि for sepal length ये जो attribute है, does it matter a lot to the final class? मतलब अगर for like the data set we saw previously वो heart disease वाला, उसमें let's say blocked artery सब जो भी yes थे वो सब heart disease वाले भी थे, and जो भी no थे वो सब no heart disease वाले भी थे. That means you have a very good correlation. Like you can say कि अगर ये yes है तो there is a high chance that this will also be yes, and अगर ये no है then there is a high chance that this will also be no. So the class correlation for petal length and petal width is really high, 0.9490 and 0.95. Okay, and the higher it is, the better, because there is a better chance that you will be able to classify it correctly. So did you notice कि जो पहला हम लोग ने attribute लिया वो petal length ही था. Petal length का threshold it calculated on its own, and true है कि false है, depending on that it goes further, right? As you saw here, petal width has the highest correlation. So because of that, it means that we can take petal width at the root of our node as well. या सॉरी पेटल विड्थ। ओके, तो अब ये ट्रू है, तो इसमें मतलब 50 टोटल 150 सैम्पल्स थे, उसमें से अगर ये ट्रू है कि मतलब पेटल विड्थ लेस देन 0.8 है, तो ये डायरेक्टली क्लासीफाई हो जाता है, मतलब 50-0-0, सच अ नाइस क्लासिफिकेशन राइट, एंड वी डायरेक्टली गेट द क्लास टू बी सेटोसा। मतलब अभी सेटोसा यू विल सी कि अभी ये कोई भी नोड में है ही नहीं, लाइक इट्स सच अ नाइस, मतलब ऐसा ऐसा डेटा सेट मिल जाए तो क्या ही चाहिए था। बट ओके, so the Gini is zero. Did you see why? Because एक का probability 1 है, दोनों का 0 है, तो 1 minus 1 is 0. So the Gini is 0. Samples इसमें 50 है और 50 के 50 सेटोसास है। अभी अगर false है तो again you can do whatever you want. So did you notice कि because there is a threshold, मतलब we don't have a yes no classifier, we can use petal width twice. See that? But this is a different threshold of course, but you can use it twice. So there is no restrictions on how you can do stuff. It's just whatever gives you the most reduction in impurity, that is the one you put here. तो बाकी के इधर 50 सैंपल्स हुए, तो जो 150 है, तो मतलब बाकी के जो 100 हुए, those are nicely divided into 50 and 50, and so yeah, so similarly ये सब आगे का हुआ. Then here the attribute changes to petal length. Here it again changes to like petal length. Then petal width, petal. So you get the idea, right? All of this was done with 2 lines of code, but using the same concepts that we saw earlier. अगर ये मैन्युअली बनाने बैठते तो हम लोग को सबका बीच बीच का एवरेज लेके we'd have to check the gene impurity for each of them. And so it's basically trial and error, but a slightly more intelligent method of trial and error. And that helps us, uh, classify it correctly. तो ये एक प्रेडिक्शन है, ये वैल्यूज है, जो भी था पेटल लेंथ, पेटल विड्थ, सेपल लेंथ विड्थ, ये उसके वैल्यूज है. एंड दिस इज अ सेकंड ट्रेनिंग एग्जांपल, एंड एरो मतलब रिजल्ट मिला 0 and 1. तो अगर एक सेकंड अगर देखेंगे ना, Setosa, versicolor, virginica. So this was basically mapped to a numerical thing to make it easier for to calculate. So 0 is Setosa and 1 is versicolor. So ये जो दो attributes है, that is predicted to be Setosa and versicolor. And ये मैंने examples वो training examples में से ही उठाए थे, तो it's correct. मतलब you can check later, but it's correct. Okay. So yeah, I think that's it for decision tree. Yeah, oh, 1 second. Yeah, I'll share it. Should I share it right now or we'll send it to you later? Is that okay? Okay, okay, yeah. Yeah, 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 yeah. So we removed that because that was a classification thing. मतलब yes and no दो ही values थे, and उसमें मतलब so let's say इधर कुछ yes and no value है, मतलब don't consider this. Consider here that petal width के जगह पे there is some I don't know, there is some like let's say blocked arteries. ट्रू है, ये फॉल्स है, तो अभी वापस इधर ब्लॉक्ड आर्टरीज लेके कोई पॉइंट नहीं है ना, बिकॉज ब्लॉक्ड आर्टरीज के जो दोनों ऑप्शंस थे वी हैव ऑलरेडी कवर्ड दैट. ब्लॉक्ड आर्टरीज ट्रू है तो एटसेट्रा एटसेट्रा होगा, ब्लॉक्ड आर्टरीज फॉल्स है तो एटसेट्रा एटसेट्रा होगा. बट पेटल विड्थ विच इज अ कंटिन्यूस एट्रीब्यूट, उसमें क्या होता है कि वी टुक दिस वन थ्रेशोल्ड 0.8 वाला थ्रेशोल्ड लिया फॉर पेटल विड्थ विच इज इन सेंटीमीटर्स. So ये ठीक है. But petal width can have some other threshold as well, right? मतलब it's like you know in like sem 2 we used to write that simple grade calculation वाला if else की मतलब अगर 90 के अप है तो A grade, 70 के अप है तो B grade. तो उसके लिए क्या करते थे, we used to start with the lowest one कि अगर less than 40 है तो fail, अगर greater than 40 है तो we'd again check it, if greater than 60 then B, less than 60 तो false. That is basically what we are doing here. So you got one uh, so you got a initial thing that gave us the best output, but again you can use it because it's not done right. जो बाकी के possibilities है petal width less than 1.75 वो तो इधर consider नहीं हुआ है ना. क्या इधर क्या consider हुआ है, everything that is greater than 0.8, but 0.8 maybe it's a whole range, right? There can be stuff greater than 0.8, less than 1, or greater than 1, or in this case like इधर जो देखा है less than 1.75 and greater than 1.75. So because of that, because the nature of the attribute is like a whole continuous range, we can take a lot of divisions in it. कब तक ले सकते हैं, जब तक impurity कम हो रहा है, मतलब अगर this can keep on going, you can have like a 10 layer deep tree as well, but the only condition is it should give us a better output. अगर वो नहीं हो रहा है तो कुछ करके पॉइंट नहीं है.
No, I had similar doubts, so it is clear now. I had a similar one.
Okay. 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 So does anybody have any doubts? Yeah. Okay. Thank you, guys.
Yes. I'm audible? Okay, just a second. I'll be presenting it now. Is the screen visible? Okay. Okay, guys. So now we'll be learning about the k nearest neighbor algorithm. This is one of the most easiest algorithm that you can see, and it will be really fun to learn this algorithm. So the session will be divided into two parts. The first one is the theory part, and the second is practical. Theory might be a bit boring, but then this is really simple, so you guys can understand it. And the practical, obviously, it is really fun to do. So let's look at the nearest neighbor algorithm first. Keep it in mind that I'm not discussing about the k nearest neighbor algorithm yet. It is just the nearest neighbor algorithm. So simply put, the nearest neighbor algorithm memorizes the training data and classifies unknown data points by finding the class of the closest example. So in plain English, if I say, tell me who your nearest neighbor is, and I'll tell you who you are. So let's take a look at the example that is on the right side of the screen. There are two classes. The first one is the green class, and the second one is the red class. And assume that you have a data point that you need to classify. So just a second. Yeah. So assume that you need to classify this black point. Okay. So what the algorithm says is find the distance of the black point to all the points in the data set. That is to this point, this point, this point, this point, each and every point. And then the class of the closest point will be the class of the unknown data point. Did you understand this, guys? Because this is the only thing that is there in the algorithm. Can anyone confirm?
Yes.
Okay. Okay, so this actually does not learn a function from the training data to determine the class of the unknown data. What it does is it just memorizes it and finds the distance to each and every point, and then the shortest, and then the point that is nearest to the unknown data point, that class is assigned to the unknown data point. Okay, so how does it work? Again, the same thing. If you know how to find the nearest neighbor, then you have actually implemented the algorithm. So let's look at how to find the distance between 2 points. So there is something known as the distance matrix. Okay, so there are many distance metrics like the L1 norm, L2 norm, L3, L4, L10, L infinity. There are many. Okay, so L1 and L2 are the most commonly used. So I'll be discussing them over here right now. What is the L1 norm? L1 norm is also known as the Manhattan distance. Okay, so L1 norm is the sum of the magnitudes of vectors in a space. So assume a data point 5 comma 3 and you want to find the distance, the L1 distance from the origin. Okay, so what you do is sum of the magnitudes of the vectors in a space. That is mod of 5 plus mod of 3. That is the distance of 5 comma 3 from the origin is 8. Okay, but if you look at the L2 norm, uh, actually you all have actually learned the L2 norm before. So it is just the Euclidean distance. That is the square root of x1 minus x to the whole square plus y1 minus y to the whole square. So the diagram to the right actually represents the L1 norm and the L2 norm. What it says is L1 norm, the distance equals to mod of x plus mod of y, right? So if you plot mod of x plus mod of y equals to 1, if you want to calculate the distance for 1, then mod of x plus mod of y will give you this type of shape, right? And rotated square,
Shravan, hello.
right?
Sorry to interrupt.
Yeah.
Can you please be a bit louder?
Okay, so am I audible now? Is this okay? Hello?
Yeah, we'll wait for everyone else.
Yeah, so is this okay? Is this sound?
Yes, okay, Shravan.
Yeah. So the L1 norm, the formula for the L1 norm is mod of x plus mod of y equals to the distance. So assume that you want to calculate for a distance of 1. So what you'll do is mod of x plus mod of y equals to 1. And the equation for mod of x plus mod of so the representation on the graph for mod of x plus mod of y equals to 1 will be a rotated square, right? And for the L2 norm, we know the formula x1 square plus y1 square equals to 1. So that will be a circle. Okay. So you can actually find a problem in the nearest neighbor algorithm. That is, assume that there is an outlier point. Okay. So the outlier, so according to the nearest neighbor algorithm, if there is any point near to the blue point, that is the outlier point, then that will be classified as blue. But you know that it should be classified as the purple class. So what can be a good solution for this? The best solution for this is to take a vote of some number of data points that are in the vicinity. So let's take a case of k equals to 3. So now we have shifted to the k nearest neighbor algorithm. Till now we have only discussed the nearest neighbor algorithm where you just see which is the nearest neighbor and you assign that class to the unknown data point. But now we're looking at the k nearest neighbors. We're taking the vote of the k nearest neighbors. We are saying that the if there are many if assume a point over here. Okay, so you can find that the nearest neighbor is blue, but then if k equals to 3, then you have to find 3 nearest neighbors. So it will be blue, purple, and purple. So the purple representation is more than the blue one. So the unknown data point will be given a class of purple. So so the unknown data point is classified correctly. Okay, this is the solution for this outlier point. So the obvious doubt would be what should be the value of k? Because k can be 1, 3, 5, 10, 11, 15, any number, right? So determining the value of k is not actually easy and you should do some smart trial and error. But there are a few ideas for selecting k, so we can discuss on them. Choosing a smaller value of k can be noisy and will have a high influence on the result. So as you've seen over here, we have taken k as 1. So only the nearest neighbor will be considered. So if you take k as 1, then your decision boundaries will be a bit noisy. As you can see, each and every point has some decision boundary. But for k equals to 3, a higher number than 1, you can see that the decision boundary is smooth. The purple and the blue classes are classified correctly. The second thing is you can choose a value of k that is equals to the square root of n by 2. where n stands for the number of samples in your training data set. So what you can see over here, the square root of n by 2, there is no derivation for this. This is just a trial and error, and people have found out that generally square root of n by 2 is a good number for k. And the third one is to try to avoid values of k which are odd. Sorry, try to keep the values of k which are odd and try to avoid the even numbers. Okay, so to the example to the right side of the screen, you can see that for the k equals to 6, assume the yellow point to be the purple point. Okay, assume this point to be purple. So what you can see is there are 3 yellow points and 3 purple points. So you need so there is no majority vote over here, so you should do some tiebreaker or something, like you'll give the purple one more priority or the yellow one more priority. So to avoid that, take values of k that are odd, so that for k equals to 3, you can see that they can only be one clear majority. So try to keep the values of k as odd. uh, okay, so the pros and cons of the k nearest neighbor algorithm. The first pro is it is simple to implement. Obviously, you can see you should just find the distance of the unknown data point to each and every data point, and that's it. Then flexible to feature slash distance choices. So as you have seen, there are many distance choices that you can take: L1, L2, L infinity, anything, and then you can use different features of the data set. Third one is naturally handles multi-class cases. So you can see over here that I can add some other class, and the unknown data point will just calculate the distance, and the nearest one or the k nearest ones, whichever is the majority, that will be given the class, right? So this is very easy. So it can handle the multi-class cases, and then can do well in practice with enough representative data. So more the data, better it will perform. So the cons of the algorithm are you need to determine the value of k, and as I've said in this slide, you need to find the perfect value of k. If the value of k, you've chosen a smaller value or a very large number, then then it will affect the results, and you can see this in the practical that I'll be showing in some time. The computation cost is quite high because we need to compute the distance of each query instance to all training examples. So as you can see, each and every data point, the distance of the unknown data to each and every data point in the data set has to be calculated. So assume a data set of 10,000 or 20 or 30,000. Then you have to calculate 30,000 distances, and then you have to find the minimum. So this is actually not computationally good, this algorithm. And then storage of data, same thing. Assume 1 million data points in your data set. So you have to store all the 1 million data points because you need to calculate the distances. So you need those data points. And then you must have a meaningful distance function. So distance function actually uh, affects your accuracy. That is not that important right now, but you need to uh, find a meaningful distance function according to the application. So that's it for the theory part. If anybody has any doubts, then they can ask. Else we'll move on to the practical part. Any doubt? Hello? Hello? Okay, cool. Uh, okay, so Palak, can you share the collab link? Yeah. Okay, so guys, you can go to the link that Palak has shared, and then I'll take you forward from there on. If anybody is facing any problem, just let me know in the chat section. If you guys have opened it, then say yes or done or something. Okay. Cool. I guess there's no issue then. Then we can start with the practical part. Mm, okay. So so I'll first tell you what the data set is. You can see that there are some weird things like WTT, PTI, EQW, SBI, and stuff. So what this is you've given a classified data from a company. Okay, so it is classified. You don't know what those columns mean. They are just numbers, and they have hidden feature columns names. But they have given you the data and the target classes. So what the target classes are, if these are the values of the data points, then this is the target class 1 or 0. So you have two classes over here, that is 1 and 0, and these are the data points. Okay. Okay. So now we'll import the important libraries, that is pandas, numpy, matplotlib, and seaborn. Seaborn and matplotlib are for plotting, and numpy and pandas are for handling our data. So just run it. Okay. So now you need the data set in your collab. So you can click on the drive link and download the CSV file, and then you can upload it over here. There is a folder button over here, and then you'll have to drag and drop it over here. So if you guys have done that, then just again write yes or done. Okay, what about the others? Is anybody facing any problem? Okay, so I'll proceed now. Okay, so after you have imported the after you have uploaded your data, then you can read your CSV. I guess you had a lecture yesterday or day before on pandas and numpy, so I'll not be diving into those details. So you can take a look at your data set, the top five rows in your data set, and these are the target classes. Okay, so one important thing is you need to standardize your variables, and especially for the algorithms that are dependent on the distance metric that we've discussed earlier, you need to standardize your variables. You need to understand that because okay, so I'll explain that to you. Assume and take an example where the person's age ranges from 25 to 40, and the income ranges from 50,000 to 1,10,000. Okay, so take just two observations, that is 1 lakh and age of 30, and the other is 80,000 and the age of 25. Okay, so the Euclidean distance between these 2 points will be some 20,625. So you can see that this 30 and 25, the age variable, uh, actually did not contribute to the distance, right? Because this is overpowering them. You can see that it can be noted that the higher magnitude of income affected the distance between the 2 points. So even if you increase the age or something, even if there is a greater difference between the age, that is 30 and 90, even then you can't find much difference in the distance. So this is a problem. So you need to scale the data between two variables, that is -1 and 1, so that both the salary and the age come down to a scale where each and every variable matters. Okay, so after performing scaling, that is, there are different methods to perform scaling. You can take a look at them. If you just search on Google, then you'll find it. So the 1 lakh comes down to 0.608, and the age of 30 comes down to 0.260. The 80,000 comes down to minus 0.447, and the age of 25 comes down to 1.192. So now if you calculate the distance, then it comes to 1.1438. Okay, so now even if the age becomes 35 or 40, this will change. And just a second. Yeah, so this will change. So the distance metric will also be changing. Did you guys understand this, or should I repeat this? Did you guys understand the scaling part and why scaling is important? Okay. So if you have any doubts, you can just unmute and ask. Else I'll proceed now. Okay, how do we decide the scale? Okay, we don't decide the scale. There are different algorithms. The first one is using the mean and the standard deviation, and the second one is direct scaling. So there are formulas for that. So for over here we'll be using the standard scalar. Okay, so this is a different one. So in which you'll okay, so here is the formula: z equals to x minus u upon s, where u is the mean and s is the standard deviation. So you calculate the mean and the standard deviation of your whole data set, and then for each and every data point x, you will subtract the mean and divide it by the standard deviation. Okay, so it will automatically be scaled. So it will center the data around the origin. So did you get it? Okay, just a second. Okay, done. So any other doubts? Okay, then I'll proceed further. Um, okay, so we'll be performing standard scalar to perform the scaling so that each and every variable has the same impact on the distance. Okay, so standard scalar is a class inside scikit-learn.preprocessing. So we'll be creating an object for that, and then we'll fit it. So what do you mean by and okay, so this df.drop target class, right? So what we are doing over here is that we don't need to scale our target class, right? Because the target class will be 1 and 0 only. The other points need to be scaled, but the target class need not be scaled. So that is the reason we are removing that from the input that we'll be giving to the standard scalar. Okay, so dot fit actually calculates the mean and the standard deviation, and then standard scalar dot transform will transform each and every data point. That is, it will perform this operation. That is the this operation x minus u upon s will be done by transform. Okay, so now you've got the scaled features, and then if you print the scale features, then you can see that each and every column of your data set has been scaled. So now if you calculate the distance, then each and every variable will have the same contribution towards the distance. Okay, so we'll split the data set into train and test. So what we're doing here is the test size is 0.3, that is 30% of the data set goes into the test data, and the 70% goes into the training data. Over here x are the scale features. The scale features, what is scale features? Scale features is this: the transformed data that is made after scaling the features. So the scale features, and then y is our output class, that is 0 or 1. So we'll be sending this into the train, test, and split function, and this will give us 4 variables. So the 4 variables are x train, x test, y train, and y test. So for each and every data point in X train, you'll get a Y train, that is 0 or 1. And then for each and every point in the X test, you'll get a Y test, that is 0 or 1. Okay. So now let's initialize the k nearest neighbor instance. So here knn equals to k nearest neighbor, and you have set the n neighbors as 1. So we have discussed earlier, right, that the the variable k actually affects our algorithm. So first we are taking k as 1, and then we are proceeding, and then we'll see how to choose the value of k. So we have sent it the training data. Knn.fit means you're sending the training data, that is the X train and Y train, and the Knn is trained now. And after that, you have pred equals to knn.predict. So as your knn is trained, you'll do the predict on the X test, because the X test you have not given it to the knn algorithm for training, right? So we'll be using the X test so as to test our algorithm. So it will give out some predictions. Okay, so now to see what the predictions are and to see how our algorithm performed, what you'll do is you'll import something known as a confusion matrix. Okay, so for the confusion, what is confusion matrix? Just a second, I'll show that to you. Yeah, this is the confusion matrix. So what the confusion matrix is, the rows are the predicted classes and the columns are the true classes. So if the predicted and the true class are both positive, then it will be on 0 comma 0. And then if the predicted is positive and the true class is negative, that is the wrong prediction, then it will be on 0 comma 1. And then for 1 comma 0, if the predicted class is negative and the true class is positive, and for 1 comma 1, predicted class is negative and the true class is negative. Okay, so if we print the confusion matrix for the Y test and pred, because here we just predicted it and now we are comparing it with the original ones and zeros that we already know that this should be the output. So when we compare them, we get this 151, 8, 15, and 126. So according to this, we can see that the 151 is the true positives and the 126 are the true negatives. That are, these both are the correct classifications, while 15 and 8 are the wrong classification. So now you can actually find the accuracy, right? That is the total number of true positives plus true negatives divided by the total. That comes to 0.92, and the error is 15 plus 8 divided by 300. That is the total number of data points. It comes out to be 0.0766. Okay, so this is a pretty good accuracy, but then you can improve it further because you have only tested for k equals to 1, right? You can test it for different values of k. So to do that, I've written a small for loop where the knn algorithm gets n neighbors as I. So I is in the range of 1 to 40. So the knn algorithm will be trained for all values, all k equals to 1 to 40. And then if we plot our error graph, then it comes out to be in this form. Okay, so here we can see that it started at 0.075 or something that we have calculated over here, and then there's a sharp decrease at k equals to 3 or 4 or somewhere. And then as we proceed further, you can see that after some point it just wiggles at a constant position, right? It is not, the error is not changing much. So let's look at as we've already seen, for k equals to 1 you got this matrix, and for k equals to 17 you get this matrix. Okay, yeah, so actually this should be k equals to 17 over here. I'll do the changing. Okay, so for k equals to 17, for k equals to 1, you can see that 151 plus 126 are the correctly classified ones, while for k equals to 17, 153 and 132 values are correctly classified. So the accuracy has actually improved. And for k equals to 23, again it decreased, 150 and 131. So we can see that k equals to 17 is a good value of k because the accuracy increased. And you can see over here also, for k equals to 17, the accuracy is a lot, right? k equals to 17 will come somewhere around here. So this is the best one. So we've chosen that, and we have not only so we have actually squeezed more performance out of our model by choosing a better value of k. So did you guys understand this? Okay. So if there are any doubts, then you can ask. Else, I'm done with the presentation. Yeah, you can even try for k equals to 35 and 37, because even large values of k is not good, because there can be some misclassifications. We can actually take k further and we can see that k will be varying again. So for our data set is small, so that is why I've chosen the values of k that are nearer to 10 or 20, in the range 10 to 20, because our data set is already small. So large values of k is not good. Mm. Okay, I guess Palak, everything is cool now. Yeah, yeah, sure. Okay, so I can actually ask you a good question over here. Um, Over here, what if for k equals to 1, you find two data points of different classes that are at the same distance? So does anybody have an answer for that? Which class to be assigned? You guys understood the question, right? Should I repeat it? Hello? Okay, so any answers? Okay, so I'll give you the answer. Uh, okay, so here you can see that approximately both are at the same distance, but assume that both are at the same distance. So what you'll do is, there's no solution for this actually. You need to actually say that in the algorithm you have to state that I choose the green point or I choose the red point, or you should give someone more priority. So that is the tiebreaker. You can't do anything about that. So that is one thing. Okay, so I'll just give a overview of the k nearest neighbor algorithm. So basically, what it says is, tell me the nearest neighbor and I'll tell you who you are. So in this, you can see that the green data point is the closest to the unknown data point. So That is the reason we have assigned the black data point as we have classified it into the green class. Okay. Um, okay. So for the distance metrics, as I have said, uh, okay. So the okay. So one thing that I can say why distance metric is important is because L1 norm and L2 norm cover different regions. Okay. So you can see that L1 norm covers only this region, while L2 norm covers the whole circle. So what's happening over here is that the L1 norm is a much stricter condition than the L2 norm. So assume that this is the unknown data point. Just a second. I'll, yeah. So you can see that uh, assume that the 0 comma 0 is the unknown data point that you want to classify, and there are two data points over here and over here. So if we choose the L1 norm, then this is the data point that will be considered, not this one. But for the L2 norm, you can both of these come under that condition. So the L2 norm is a much relaxed condition than the L1 norm. Do you guys understand this?
Shravan, is it done or sorry?
Yeah, it's done. If you can continue.
Okay. Because we'll start with this thing, the clustering part. Then. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Okay, guys. So we'll be starting with the next topic now, which is this thing, the clustering part. We'll be touching the clustering algorithm. Okay, I'll just share my screen. Yeah, Palak, just check mic check and the screen share check. Okay, perfect. Okay, guys. So what we'll be starting with is till now we have just seen all the supervised algorithms, right? Like I had said in the first on day one when we were discussing the intro to ML. So that time we had discussed, right? The data which we get usually has labels, so we know what the output is. But what if we even saw a category which was called the unsupervised learning, where we didn't have any of the labels for the data which we were given. So what is unsupervised learning? Yeah. Okay. So um. Yeah, Palak, just inform me if there's any doubts. Okay, I'll go in the PPT mode. Yeah, okay. So what is unsupervised learning? So unsupervised learning is again, I'll just give a brief overview if someone didn't understand on day one what it exactly means. So unsupervised learning is a machine learning technique in which the users are not given any of the labels as such. So we are just given the input. So for example, imagine the situation, you might have in these past 2 days, you have come across a lot of data sets, right? You came across the housing price data set, then you came across the Titanic data set, then you came across this thing, which is the Iris data set. So all these, there were a lot of things common, and one of them was that all of them had an output. So, for example, the housing prices had an output, which is the price of the house. The Titanic data set had an output as if the person survived or not, and the Iris data set classifies it into the class of which it belongs to. So all these had their output labels, but in unsupervised learning, you don't have it. You allow the model to, there's no restriction. It has to predict this or it has to predict that. The model is completely independent of any of these, and you give model the complete freedom as to how it wants to, classify whatever data it has been given. So, for example, I would just say, if I'm given a bunch of I've been given a fruit basket, for example. The fruit basket might have apples, oranges, and a lot of other fruits. The model doesn't know key. if what is this about, if if this fruit is an apple, if this fruit is an orange, if this fruit is a banana, something like that. But we give the model the freedom to, you yourself understand it, what is this and what is that. Okay, so the model might seek, model might take up, if the model is given that freedom, so model might, for instance, take up shape as an example, or it might take color as an example. So if it sees, apple is red in color, so this becomes one cluster. So I'll say, this is an apple because it has this particular red color. I'll say orange because it has a particular orange color. I would say banana because of its shape and it has a yellow color. So because of that, we give the model a complete freedom to detect what is said is the patterns in the data set. So what was the pattern over here? The pattern over here was a color, which we took an example. We can even take shape as an example. If we took shape as an example, so there is a possibility that it might get a confused between fruits which are of almost similar colors. Okay, so or of almost, if you take shape as an example, so probably it might get a little confused between apple and orange because of little roundness in the shape, but it might clearly identify banana because a banana has a peculiar shape, which makes it different from the other fruits. So that's what it does. You give it some data, it just discovers the patterns in it, and the patterns might be something which even humans cannot be able to detect. So sometimes you have a very large amount of data which is available with you, but what happens is that you are not able to detect the patterns in it. You might apply all the exploratory data analysis which we had done yesterday. So you might do each and everything to understand what type of pattern is there in the data. But sometimes you are not able to understand it just because maybe the pattern is very complex to understand, or the data which you are given is really big. So what you do over there is that you try to understand the patterns using unsupervised machine learning. And once you have detected those patterns, based on the patterns that you understand, so if you understand, yeah, this is the pattern which is there in the data, and once you understand the pattern, you can now understand what type of algorithm you want to apply on this. So that is how unsupervised machine learning works. Like you can see over here, you have been given raw data. The raw data is like a fruit basket which you're supposed to give you. The algorithm then, just because of its, so here you can see, it is taking, I guess, both into consideration, the shape as well as the color. So like you can see, it might take, if it has a very red color, so it might say it is an tomato or something. But if you tell it, it has a little bit of green patch on the top, then you might, and as a red part below, it might say it's a strawberry. And if it's a yellow color, then it might say it's a pear or a lemon. So that's how unsupervised machine learning works.